Hi everyone, thanks for the introduction and thanks for seeing faces here because I was a bit worried. It's one of the last talks, so maybe there won't be a lot of people, but I'm happy that you are here. I'm working in NIL Foundation as a researcher, and today I will talk about zkSharding. zkSharding is a zkRollup, and it integrates sharding in its architecture. And beyond this, I also want to talk about why sharding is a good tool to actually scale layer 2s and how it aligns with the Ethereum vision, actually. Okay. But before diving in detail all these motivations and zkSharding, I just want to explain what is zkRollup. I'm sure most of you know, but just as an introduction, let me talk about this. So in zkRollup system, or in general, we have zkRollups because layer 1 wants to outsource its execution. And here, zkRollup gives that service to layer 1. And basically, it consists of basic key components such as sequencer, executor, submitter, and prover. And here, sequencer just gets the transactions, orders them, and gives them to executor to execute. Executor executes the transactions according to state transition function and updates the state. And we have submitter here. That submitter just gives necessary data to layer 1, and here layer 1 is Ethereum. And since it's a zkRollup, there is a zero knowledge proof generation by the prover. That prover shows that everything is executed correctly. And Ethereum verifies that, and then it's done. And when we look at today's rollup ecosystem, what we see that most of them deploy actually centralized sequencer. And why they choose this? Because it simplifies transaction ordering. They don't need to build consensus mechanism on top of it to agree on the order or inclusion of a data. It improves performance because that's obviously much more efficient to do that and easier to implement also. But here, centralized sequencer is just single entity, and all responsibility belongs to that single entity to decide whether include or not include the transaction. And when we look at Ethereum goals, Ethereum goal is to be a global censorship-resistant permissionless blockchain. And when you look at this, layer 2s with centralized sequencer and Ethereum goal, actually they do not align. Obviously, this is not censorship resistant because that sequencer can decide to include or not include the transactions, and it's not permissionless either. And this is not just about aligning with Ethereum goals, it's also that centralized sequencer approach gives or introduces a lot of security risks. But before talking about that, I just want to show you this very famous blockchain trilemma. I'm sure all of you know that. But it says that scalability, security, and decentralization together is very hard to achieve. So if you want to achieve one of them or two of them, you have to sacrifice the other a bit. But Ethereum didn't want to sacrifice none of these properties, so they see that actually rollups can overcome this challenge that is defined by this blockchain trilemma, and therefore they decided to have that layer 2 centric approach. But when we look at Ethereum 2 with a centralized layer 2, let's look what it achieves actually. And it achieves scalability because the number of computations per second increases a lot, obviously. And when we look at security, I want to just focus on safety and liveness here because just for simplification, we could extend that security definition. But here, when I say safety, I mean that only valid transactions are going to be included to the state, and liveness means that all honest transactions are eventually be part of the state. And for specifically when we talk about zkRollups, Ethereum guarantees safety because for zkRollup cannot lie about execution because there is a proof. So Ethereum gives this safety, and safety is still there. But since this is centralized sequencer solution, obviously it's not decentralized anymore. There's just one single entity. And whenever you have such a centralized authorities, automatically you cannot guarantee liveness. Because if that central entity fails, then all execution stops, and honest transaction will not be on the state. So we cannot guarantee that. And this is not just liveness. Also, there are some there are other serious security risks, such as censorship resistance. Here, we cannot rely on that centralized sequencer that will always behave fairly. So let's go back to the beginning of the problem. We wanted to scale Ethereum, and Ethereum see that Rollups actually a good solution for that, and they decided to let's deploy layer 2 solutions. But most of the layer 2s have this centralized sequencer, so in future they have to be decentralized. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense because we want to be away from Web 2-centric solutions, so we shouldn't go back to that. And whenever we want to decentralize layer 2s, we will have the same problem. How we will scale layer 2s then? And it seems like it's a chicken and egg problem, and the question is how we can scale layer 2s. And you know that scaling is not a new issue in blockchain world, and it has been discussed for many years. It's not a new question. And the proposed solutions usually fall into 2 categories. We could have different categories, but for this talk, I just choose these categories: vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. So when you want to scale, you just want to increase the number of computations per second. And vertical scaling just says that, okay, let's increase the hardware requirements of validators. So we have a just single chain, blockchain, and the validators will increase their hardware in order to do much faster computation. That definitely increases the throughput, but there is a centralization risk because it reduces the accessibility. Not everyone can be a validator, and the number of validators will be very limited. And it's not going to be really permissionless. Yeah, they need a lot of investment and so on. Plus, there is scalability limits because we cannot ask validators to increase their hardware infinitely. There is a limit there. And the other one is horizontal scaling. Horizontal scaling is similar to parallel computation idea. So if you want to increase your computation speed, naturally you try to parallelize them as much as you can. And this is also the same idea. So we will have multiple blockchains, and they are run by different set of validators, and that's the solution, basically. So whenever you want to scale more, you include more validators and more blockchains to the system. However, this is really hard to design. It requires a lot of thinking, and especially when you, because these blockchains are not just independent. They have to communicate. They should send transactions to each other. And when you have that communication, you have to be very careful, because when you want to be scalable, you can also create some bottleneck with this communication. So this part especially very important when you want to scale horizontally, because it shouldn't be bottleneck. But when we look at these 2 solutions or 2 categories, horizontal scaling looks more ideal for Web3 vision in general. And therefore, we choose horizontal scaling to decentralize our layer 2. There are many horizontal scaling options as well, but here we decided to deploy sharding. What is sharding? Sharding is not a new technique in databases. It is used a lot because if instead of holding huge databases, it's better to divide it, and like that it is easier to access the data or update the database. And it is the same idea. So if you think the state as a big database, in our shards, we just divide these states into to be maintained in our execution shards. So we have many execution shards, and they have their specific set of validators, and they are just responsible from that state, holding that state or maintaining that state. And we have also main shard. Main shard is just there to synchronize these execution shards, and it's also run by all validators. Since we are zkRollup, we have also our prover network and our sync committee, which is an interface between our shards, prover network, and Ethereum. And we have, of course, Ethereum. So what Ethereum provides here is the safety. So Ethereum is our settlement layer. It means that when something is verified by Ethereum, then all transactions are going to be finalized. And let's look at in more detail our architecture. As I said, we have execution shards, and they are just, you can just consider them as a blockchain. They manage set of accounts, and in our design, each account is managed by smart contract. And it is run by a specific set of validators. And when they are running this blockchain, they run their local consensus algorithm on top of it. And I said that these shards need to communicate because they should be able to send messages to each other. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense because it's not whole. Then it's not a whole system. Therefore, we need to introduce cross-shard communication, but we had to be very careful of that because we don't want to create a bottleneck here. And therefore, we did some design choices in our cross-shard communication system. First decision that we made is that our cross-shard transactions are non-atomic. What it means that transactions on destination shard can fail or revert it. And we give the responsibility to handle such errors to the smart contract. That gives a lot of complexity to the smart contracts, the smart contract developers, but I mean it's not impossible to do. It just needs more attention than usual implementation, but it's a trade-off that we had to make to have efficient process here. And also here we choose optimistic approach. What we mean by optimistic approach, validators in destination shard don't need any proof from the source shard to execute the transaction. So they don't need any proof that shows that that transaction actually valid. So they just believe whatever comes from the source shard and execute the transaction accordingly. In classical sharded blockchain systems, which are not rollups, that might not be the best option to be optimistic because their shards need to understand if they are executing the correct data. But in our case, we integrate zero-knowledge proofs to our system. So if some shard gets malicious and sends some wrong data, then it will not be proven, and Ethereum will never verify that. Therefore, that's okay to have that optimistic approach, given that we incentivized our validators to behave mostly correctly. And also, our communication is permissionless. It means that shards can send messages to each other easily. It's not that complicated. It's the same as sending the transaction in its own shard. And let me also talk about our interchain structure. I said that execution shards are just blockchain, but here they are also connected with DAG. Why we have that? We have that because when an execution shard sends a message to another shard, we want to guarantee that this message will not be censored by the other shard, and it will be executed fast. And therefore, we have that DAG. That DAG just enforces some order of execution of transactions, and with this DAG structure that we call shard DAG, we actually have censorship-resistant cross-shard communication. And here, as in classical blockchain, each block links to the previous block in its chain. Also, each block references to a main shard block, and also it links to a set of blocks from other shards. Okay, also, as I said, we have a main shard, and that main shard is run by all validators. And this main shard idea is just very typical to have in all sharded systems, because these execution shards has some authority to understand what is the final state in, or what is the final data that we can trust. And therefore, we have our main shard. It is mostly responsible from operational executions such as randomness generation, staking, slashing, finalizing the execution shard blocks. And so there's no there's no DApp or other type of smart contracts or tokens on it. It's just for operational executions, and it is run by all validators. And that global consensus says that what is final in the execution shards. Until now, I just explained classical sharded blockchain structure, but since we are Rollup, as I said, we are connecting ourselves to Ethereum with the zero-knowledge proofs. And whenever so we have a sync committee here. That sync committee just observes all shards and just gathers the data for prover network. Prover network proves the transactions, executions, and so on. And sync committee just submits the data to the Ethereum. And Ethereum then validates the state with the proof. So when the state is verified, then we say that all transactions that belong to that state actually finalized. You see that we have here local consensus and global consensus. That finality is not actually directly related to Ethereum finality. It is just a mechanism here for internal safety. Actually, our internal safety provides us to be live at the Ethereum level. Because if we were not safe internally, then of course the Ethereum will not validate the proofs, and just we cannot guarantee the liveness. Therefore, it was important to have that safety. Okay, so this is my last slide. Just I want to give you our properties in the last slide and what we achieved that. So we achieved censorship-resistant cross-shard communication by these DAG-based enforced CST inclusions with DAG. And we decided some key design choices in our communication channels, such as optimistic permissionless and non-atomicity, and that increased the cross-shard communication performance. And we just back up that with zkPs, and in the end, we have just trustless parallel computations. And that's the end of my talk. I know that I give very high overview of our design, but if you have detailed questions, you can ask me from Telegram, or if you have questions right now also, I'm happy to answer them.
Great speech. Thanks a lot. Any questions? One more question.
So, can you just go one slide back? Actually, one more. Sorry.
This one.
Yeah, in this one. So I'm wondering how this prover network is working, because when you find a malicious transaction or something happened in the layer 2, and I think prover network should catch it and needs to correct it, right? So maybe it's my lack of knowledge about zk, how prover network is correcting the malicious and not proved data in the layer 2 actually.
Yeah. So in such occasions, we have state invalidity proofs. This is also generated by our prover network. And if it happens, we have to roll back to the correct state. So that's a lot of work, but under the with our security assumptions, we just don't expect that it happens all the time, given that we incentivize validators and we have secure consensus mechanisms. But in general, the idea is just that invalid proofs will come and then main shard will decide to roll back to the correct state. But nothing will be verified on Ethereum till correction. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. One last question. No? Okay. Thanks a lot.